Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to September's DevSecOps Bunch, our monthly session where we bring in experts to talk about all things DevSecOps. This month, I'm excited to have my friend and partner in crime, Patrick Carey from Synopsys. Today, we're going to be talking about winning with security automation in both your web and your mobile app pipelines. Now, as we normally do, we try to wait about 30 to 60 seconds to give people time to get in here before we get rolling. So I'm going to fill for a second until we get that started. For those of you who are here today, we are recording this session. So whether you attend or were registered for it, you will get a copy of the recording. You will also get a copy of the slides in a PDF format. This session is chock full of additional resources for learning. So you're going to find some QR codes and links throughout the presentation that you can use to jump to other content. So whether you have your phone ready with you or you click through those links when we come back, or you'd like to screenshot, you'll be able to learn more from this process as well. As I said before, this is our monthly DevSecOps Bunch. So if this is your first one, please subscribe to the future ones because we're going to have great conversations throughout the rest of 2023 and into 2024. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get us started officially today. Today's DevSecOps Bunch, again, is winning with security automation in your web and your mobile app pipelines. So joining me today from Synopsys is Patrick Carey, the Senior Director of Product Marketing. Patrick, would you like to introduce yourself to the crowd today?
Yes, thanks, Brian. Hello, everybody. As Brian said, I'm Patrick Carey. I run the product marketing organization for the software integrity group of Synopsys. So we're the division of Synopsys that is focused on application security and DevSecOps. And I've been in the AppSec industry since about 2015. And then prior to that, various roles in software engineering, product management, and marketing in a number of different industries. And Brian, I'm excited to be here today and do this session with you.
Well, thanks for joining us, Patrick. I'm Brian Reed. I'm the Chief Mobility Officer at NowSecure. If you're wondering what one of those is, that's a person who's been doing mobile applications and mobile security since 2007. So I've been at this for a long time. My mobile journey began in the BlackBerry days when BlackBerry was king of the hill, and I've been in mobile ever since. BlackBerry is what brought me to the security world along the journey. So I am host and speaker on events like this, and I do lots of other things in the marketplace. So today's agenda, we're going to roll into a little bit of intros for our two companies. Then we're going to take a look at what the survey says. There's some really interesting benchmark data out this year, more recently around DevSecOps. Then we're going to jump into testing techniques. We'll go into the pipeline. As is tradition in this session, we have a deep dive into the pipeline. And today we're going to look at parallel pipelines, which is web and mobile running in parallel and all integrated together with a new kind of technology and process that we'll have a look at. Reminder, we are taking questions at the end, so please use the Q&A tab, and in the Q&A tab, ask your question. We will get to those at the end. Any that we miss, we'll follow up afterwards. The chat should be open, so you can be chatting with each other while this session is running as well, if you'd like to communicate with other folks or simply react to what we're saying today. Quick intro for those who are new to NowSecure. We are a mobile security company. We've been doing this since 2009, so that puts us 14 years. We provide a full suite of solutions. We'll talk a little bit about those today. We really believe in the underpinnings of mobile application, mobile security. And so as a result of that, we've done a lot in the open source world with tools. We do a lot with standards around OWASP. We lead the OWASP mobile project. One of our researchers leads that project along with others around the industry, and we integrate and work a lot with the other DevSecOps tool in the pipeline. So it's all about speed, agility, quality, cost efficiency, and squeeze out some risk while you're helping your development team ship software faster. We work with the OWASP community and the Google ADA community in terms of setting standards and then testing against those standards. Most of the big tech vendors use us internally for their mobile initiatives. We do a lot with the carriers, and we're recognized as leaders in the market. Finally, we work in all major industries. You'll find us heavily in mobile-centric organizations, right? So consumer, retail, transportation, consumer goods, the carrier business, of course, a lot of entertainment, also into the high-tech world. M-Health now, as healthcare is becoming more and more mobile. And of course, finance and government are the biggest investors in mobile because they got lots of crown jewels to protect. So we look forward to helping you in whatever industry you come from and whatever role you are in. So with that, I'll pass it over to Patrick to talk a little bit about Synopsys for those of you who are new to Synopsys.
Thank you, Brian. So Synopsys, as our role in application security, our view is that it's really important for organizations now to move beyond sort of the string of acronyms that have sort of defined our space for the last, 1 to 2 decades, and to really start thinking about outcomes and solutions. And that's what we're committed to with the way we've assembled our portfolio. So we move to the next slide. The way we do this and the way we're focused is on helping teams drive outcomes around 3 key areas: securing their software supply chain, building security into DevOps pipelines, and then managing application security at enterprise scale. And we do that through the broadest portfolio of products and services covering AppSec and DevSecOps in the industry, spanning all stages of the software development lifecycle. And as a result, we've been fortunate enough to be named a leader in the Gartner Magic Quadrant for the last five years. Now, in addition to tools, if we move to the next slide, one of the things that we offer our customers is really the ability to assist them with subject matter expertise to help them get from point A to point B. So tools are just one part of the equation in building a high quality AppSec program. And what our 500 plus professionals in the field do is help teams define how do they get to the key outcomes, where are their gaps, and how do they build a plan and a program to bring their AppSec to the level that they need to be. And so this discussion is really of interest to us because increasingly, it's not just about mobile not just about web or cloud-based applications, right? Mobile is a key component of it, and that's one of the reasons why we're so excited to be working with Brian and the team at NowSecure.
And to drop an exclamation point on that, just a few weeks ago, I guess it is right before Black Hat, we announced a partnership in the marketplace so that we're now collaborating to help organizations with a full suite solution. So with Synopsys is really number 1 in AST with the largest market share and the biggest portfolio. We're happy to come in and help extend their suite of capabilities with our mobile expertise and products. And that allows you to have a single vendor that literally gives you everything you need. And so today's conversation is going to talk about how that can come together in your particular pipeline world. So with that, we're going to kind of start, it's always about begin with the end in mind. And, when I go back to my BlackBerry days, it wasn't about security. It was about enabling that killer application called email and continuous connectivity anywhere, anytime, from a messaging perspective, because that information flow was critical path. And if you're a BlackBerry or an older guy like me, that goes back to the 90s with BlackBerry pager, right? But security is also part of it. And that was one of the foundations with BlackBerry. So if we think about what's happening today in every business is innovating through apps, whether it's apps they build or the apps they bring in that they buy from someone else, right? Like you wouldn't build your own CRM, or you wouldn't build your own GitHub repo. You go buy GitHub repo as an app to enable you to do things. So in the development path, they all want, high productivity and low friction, but security is required to protect the business. Security may be representing, GRC and compliance in a regulated world, or simply governance internally. And all of this has to come together somewhere. And so it's been really interesting for me from my application development days in the 90s and then into the 2000s with Agile and now into DevOps. It's always been about how do you get all the teams to actually work together, whether you're a development team or across those functional teams, how do you bring it together? Funny quote from a person you would all know, an industry leader, who said, everyone is either doing, trying, or wishing they were doing DevSecOps. And so today we're going to talk a little bit more about that. Now, I made a comment about Survey Says, and you may or may not have seen that IDC for the last couple of years has been doing a DevSecOps adoption benchmark survey. And there's some really interesting data here that we thought would help kind of frame the conversation. And then we're going to jump into automation and the parallel pipes oriented story. So a couple of nuggets here for us all to think about, right? We've got a lot of people on this session today. Again, you can ask questions as we go and use the chat. You might want to react to some of these stats we're going to see here. You're going to see a pattern in the stats, right? So what do you consider your 2 biggest gaps or exposures? Well, use of open source, right? We all know that. Supply chain, we all know that. That's out there. It's interesting to see that that's crept up to #1 over the last couple of years. What was interesting to me in this year's survey was that policy management and security knowledge moved into the top 5. That says that the development side and the DevOps side are recognizing the need for security and the wish that there was standardized policy that everybody could conform to. What's also interesting is compliance is still there, but compliance kind of slid down as security knowledge and policy management kind of bubbled up in that evolution. But then you look at the breach pattern, and the breach pattern is everywhere, right? So there isn't like one place where it's like, I'm going to go solve cross-site scripting and that's going to make everything better. When you look at the comparison between 22 and 23 here, if you look at the left-hand side, notice the breach rate dramatically increased. So the attackers are recognizing that applications are a viable attack vector, and they're seemingly using them more, and organizations are self-reporting more, or maybe it's just that they're monitoring better now, that the attacks are on the rise. And they're coming in so many different places. So as we kind of work our way through this, then it gets into, so what kind of changes are you making, right? So whether it's coordination across the teams, more frequent scans, that's the whole automation in the pipeline, bringing policy in, bringing developer training in, right? Okay, these are the places we're looking to make changes. And it's helpful to look at this because if you're new to this or you're early in your DevOps and DevSecOps journey, this is a way to look at where organizations have learned the negatives and are applying their efforts, right, in order to try to do things. So thinking about, well, what are the drivers? Well, obviously, it's about catching vulnerabilities earlier. But I was at DroidCon last week, and I love the phrase. So the head of engineering for one of Uber's development teams was presenting, and his talk was about preventing bugs. Preventing bugs, whether it's security, privacy, functional, UX, whatever. It's all about catching bugs earlier in that life cycle, right? But how do you eliminate human error by using things like automation? How do you use automation to adhere to compliance, right? How do you accelerate that pace through the journey? So, Patrick, what are your thoughts here? We're looking at the highest priorities. What do you see for highest priorities, and are you seeing these same kind of patterns as you look at what's going on in the market?
Yeah, I think you hit on 3 of the key needs that we see our customers in the market are articulating. One is that call out for supply chain security, which I think of as kind of the evolution of software composition analysis. So we've come out of things like the Log4j vulnerability, the SolarWinds hack, and other open source vulnerabilities. And teams are starting to recognize that they need to take a more proactive and broader approach to thinking about how their applications are assembled. And so that's showing up in terms of the terminology of supply chain. And then obviously the push to automate all of this. So as the volume of software that's being created and the pace at which it's being created increases, teams are automating all of their development processes, and AppSec has to fit in with that in order to succeed. But then policy is something that teams are now seeing that they need to be focusing on to manage this at scale, particularly in large organizations where they have multiple teams, lots of software being developed, and sometimes they grow through acquisition. They get a lot of different teams with different practices and tools. And they're realizing in order to have a control and uniformity on that, they need a way to start looking at the way policies are applied across their organization. So all of these trends that are being surfaced here in this report are also reflected in our customer conversations.
So that leads to people making changes, right? So it's interesting to see that cloud just continues to be the center of so many things, right? And the attackers have recognized that cloud's a great way in, of course. But it gets into the automation, it gets into policy. Again, we've got integration in the pipeline. There's a common thread through all the survey data that's some combination of integrated automation tools in the pipeline, policy-led, especially for complexity and scale, making sure you meet whatever compliance requirements are, seem to flow its way all the way through all the data. But what's interesting when you look at the organizational challenges and some of the reflection there, boom, developer security knowledge pops to the top. Now, the data on the survey was a little over 50% of people had a security-oriented bent, and a little less than 50% had DevOps or development bent. So you might expect security was there, but even the development side of the house listed developer security knowledge is one of the biggest things. And collaboration is often a challenge. A lot of what we have been working on, Synopsys has been working on, is how do you bring those two teams together, right? And that's a process, tooling, enablement, safe zone, comfort, champions, all of those things sort of coming together. And of course, this year, budget constraints hit. So how do I do all of this with fewer people, or use tech instead, or automate things to eliminate labor that cost me time and money, all the way through that? So when we look at kind of summarizing where this is, it's kind of interesting to see how there's been a real spike in the last year of enabling developers to actually use the tools. Right now, it's interesting from looking at the survey data, because for some of the population, it's, hey, security team never gave me tools. For some, it's like security team's been trying to shove it to the development team, and they haven't been taking it necessarily yet, but it's happening. But what really caught my eye and caught our eye in the survey data was this huge spike about developers now really have access to tools. And that's very much where a lot of the security community has been trying to go. And even the development community is going there. If you look at what GitHub and GitLab have done to add more security into their development environment and their code repos and their CI/CD platforms, that's showing the importance of security into development roles. So we're excited to see this trend line. And some of what we're going to show you today is ways to take advantage of that. So I'm interested in comments on this too, Patrick. I'll make a quick one. So the survey says, well, maybe a third of people are very confident, 40% are confident. How confident really are people about security posture? And when you think about your own conversations and your customers and what you see in the market, what are your thoughts here?
We've done some of our own surveys, and this trend emerged as well, which is kind of ironic given the challenges that were previously cited. They see all these hurdles and things that they need to do, but they feel like their overall security posture is good. Part of this I would say stems from, you feel pretty good until you have a security incident, and then you don't feel so good. And I think organizations are feeling that they're at least making a good attempt. But if you ask the question a different way, which we have, do you believe you're pushing vulnerable code into production? You'll also see an interesting stat where a lot of them will say, yeah, we are, because we're releasing code so quickly, we know we're not getting to test everything. So I would find this to be a kind of an interesting statistic.
Right. And I think humans want to be confident in what they do. It's in our nature to be on the positive side. But, the breach slide earlier where it went, breaches doubled in volume, self-reported breaches doubled in volume, yet confidence is still kind of high, although the very confident went down a little bit. And that's sort of part of what we're all trying to do, because we all really want to make it work. This isn't about dev versus sec or anybody else. This is about how we actually grease the wheels and make it all work. So thanks for going through the journey on some of that data. If you wanted the full data set, we encourage you to have a look at IDC. What I'd like to do is kind of dumpster dive or jump into, an application security program. So Patrick, you've been doing this for a long time. What does de facto bucket look like now for the village of tools and technologies that people use and the goals they have around application security?
Well, and anybody looking at this slide will look at this and say, wow, that's a lot of stuff. Isn't there like a silver bullet for me in there? And the answer really is, probably not. And this, this is really kind of a defense in depth story. And these blocks are kind of arranged more or less where they appear across the application lifecycle. So you'll see some of the things in the front end, which is really getting an understanding of where you're at in terms of your security posture and addressing some of those developer needs. But then we move through, what do you need to do when you're building the code? What do you need to do when you're at testing? What should you be looking at when you're at packaging and deployment? What do you have to have in place when you're running the application to know where you're at? And how do you verify that what you've actually deployed in production is secure? So it's a pretty broad swath, and there are certainly more tools that are on here. If you look at like a Gartner hype cycle, like there's probably 3 times this many technologies that are deployed. But these are what we see is kind of the most common ones across the spectrum, from sort of threat and risk assessments to actual security testing tools to production, vulnerability management and scanning.
And I think it's a good point being made here also, that if you look at the development stack, it's not one tool. They might think, well, I'm using this primary IDE and we're a GitHub shop and we use Jenkins, Jira, or we use Azure or GitLab. But the reality is they have a whole bunch of frameworks and other tools they're using, and productivity tools they're using, and QA testing tools they're using, and all the rest. So it takes 2 villages, one to build it, one to test it, right? And you can layer in functional testing and production monitoring and all the rest. But the goal here is not to buy a bunch of tools. The goal here is to deliver software on time at high quality, with the risk mitigation necessary for the business. So what's been interesting for me on this whole journey, and I'm kind of a mobile native, as it were, but and learn more about web security in the journey, is there really are some fundamental differences in architecture and security strategies for web versus mobile. So if you think about the web environment, and this is not to diminish things, right? The web environment runs where most of the code's behind a firewall in the back end. A little bit comes down in the browser, and you can run a secure browser, or a browser configured securely. On the mobile world, you're talking about IP that runs on a mobile device that is reversible with common tools, which basically means a bad guy, an attacker, or a thief can get pretty close to your source code, if not all the way to your source code. That completely changes the strategy for application architecture and for testing. The mobile operating systems iterate rapidly. We have, iOS 17 just hitting, we have Android 14, and so on and so forth. So you get these fast iteration rates that kind of move faster than a lot of the web stack does as well. And so it's not that web's not complicated. There's some overcomplicating factors about mobile. And if you want to learn more about that, we have a deeper dive architecture, because a lot of people we talk to in these conversations are really kind of from a web background, and they're kind of learning their way into mobile. So a couple of years ago, in 2013, the world recognized, and a smart group of people recognized, it said, hey, web and mobile are different enough. From a standard perspective, OWASP created the OWASP Mobile Project, which today is the OWASP MASVS as compared to the web-based ASVS. And Synopsys and NowSecure are both active in OWASP, and you can see us at Global AppSec if you're going to be there. Both of us will be there here in DC this fall. But this recognizes those fundamental technical differences and requirements differences between the 2 stacks. And this is important because as we go into running your pipelines for web and mobile, you're going to see these differences come through. As Patrick was talking about all the different tools and testing types, if you look at these lists for ASVS and for MASVS, there is no silver bullet or single tool to test for all these. There is no one tool that covers all the controls here. Right? So static and SCA and DAST and things like that, they cover different elements of these tools. And so if we believe we're going to use a standard way to design, set policy design and test our web and mobile apps, then we ought to use something like OWASP, which is generally recognized as the best way to get there. So there's more to learn here if you want to see how these around the OWASP kind of world. So it's pipeline time. So as tradition in the DevSecOps bunch, we're going to drop into the pipeline. I'm going to get us started, and then I'm going to hand it over to Patrick here. So in your organization, you're going to have a pipeline diagram of some way, shape, or form that looks like this. I'm a big hater of the infinity diagram. I think it's more a linear process. It's closed loop, right? So however you've organized your pipeline, you probably have incorporated things like some set of standards. What are our corporate standards? What are our governance standards? What have you? What kind of training do we have for our teams? How are we setting requirements for building applications? Obviously, there's the session in the middle. So the code, commit, build, test, cycle. Hopefully you can do that quickly. Eventually move to stage, deploy, and then production, right? Which becomes a monitoring. And generally at the core of these pipelines are standard tools. So whether you're using, Azure or GitHub or GitLab kind of as all-in-ones, or best-of-breed tools like Bitrise, Jenkins, CircleCI, Jira, and so on and so forth, you'll have this set of tools that are kind of powering the pipeline. And ultimately, that means that security teams need to be able to work within those tools or integrated with those tools and ways to leverage automation and integrations to make these guys run screamingly fast and sort of manage the risk throughout. So we realized, as Patrick and I have been working together and looking at the market, there's really two sets of pipelines, right? So the web teams that you have are running a pipeline in a certain way with a certain set of tools, from development and requirements all the way through the testing cycles into release and production. The mobile team is using a process too. They're not exactly the same, but they have a lot of commonalities, and we're going to talk about some of those commonalities. And interestingly enough, oftentimes mobile is dependent on web because the backend for mobile may be the same backend for web. So they come together in some interesting places that we're going to talk about as well through this process. So to start down the path, let's take a look at web app in the pipeline. And as Patrick talks, I'm going to kind of build out a common way we see the pipeline come together.
Thank you, Brian. So let's start with standardization. So this is upfront, some of that work that you're doing before the developers or even picking up writing code in earnest. And this is where you define the practices for your organization. So Brian already mentioned OWASP and the work that comes out of there. We often consult with our customers on what's called the Build Security in Maturity Model, or BSIM. And this is a way for teams to determine, well, how are we going to run AppSec for all of our projects? So it's important to have that. That's sort of your strategy and game plan. But next, you need to make sure that your team has the right skills. And so security training is going to be important. One of the things that that's been the flip side of shift left has been developers now have the responsibility. They have the tools, they may not have the skills. So organizations are finding they need to double down and ensure that their developers have the right skills to actually carry that burden of securing the applications they build. When we get to requirements, this is where you're actually going to start defining how you're going to measure the success of securing your set of applications. And so there's a couple of things that are involved at this stage. One is modeling the threats for your application space. What type of attacks do you need to defend against, both internal and external attacks? What types of data you're protecting, so you can understand where you need to focus. And then that often folds into the policies you're going to apply. How are you rolling those out? And we'll talk more about policies later as they apply across web and mobile, but this is really your exit criteria for each stage. Now, when we get to code, this is where it starts getting to the tools and techniques that everybody is familiar with. So during this code commit and build phase, this is when your developers are actively writing and checking in and unit testing code. And sort of the cornerstone of those are two technologies: static analysis and software composition analysis. So think of it this way: static analysis to help your developers make sure the code that they are writing themselves is secure and high quality. Software composition analysis to help you make sure that the supply chain components that you're building on top of are secure. So we've got our software built. It's now time to test it. Now, dynamic analysis has many flavors, and depending how you're integrating dynamic analysis into your development workflow, you're going to probably use some combination of traditional DAST, API security, or IAST, or interactive. And IAST is technology that sort of is an evolution of traditional DAST and allows you to turn any of your automated tests, say if you're running automated Selenium tests at this stage, triggered by CI workflows, you can plug in an IAST solution to that to turn those into security tests and kill two birds with one stone. So hopefully by then we've eliminated a lot, if not all, of the security issues that we've detected so far. But guess what? There are other ways that security risks can enter your final built application, because now what we're doing, right, is we're rolling these applications often into public cloud infrastructure, which is often containerized, and we're using infrastructure as code to automate it. Well, the use of those packaging and virtual infrastructure technologies, those too can result in vulnerabilities that can be exploited. So you have to look at those as part of this stage as well. So as we move forward now, we're going to get to deployment. So this is where maybe a more traditional, maybe the one of the longest standing AppSec techniques that are out there. A lot of organizations will make a determination to go the extra mile and do penetration testing. Not all the time, but still today, if you have your mission critical applications, your applications that are really sitting on top of sensitive data, maybe applications that you're going to have to demonstrate security testing for regulatory, penetration testing, kind of a more methodical way of searching for and trying to exploit vulnerabilities, will be part of your environment. And then finally, as we monitor, hopefully you've eliminated everything by this point, but vulnerabilities have a way of making their way into production. It's really important that you continue to remain vigilant for these web applications as they're in production. So continuous production dynamic analysis of some kind is really important. It helps you can think of it both as a validation of your upstream AppSec testing, but also kind of an early warning for your IT security team for anything that made it through, so that they can take proactive action the moment a vulnerability is detected, hopefully before any bad actors can find it. So that's web security. Brian, do you want to talk about how this translates for mobile environment?
Yeah, and so what's going to be interesting as I transition over here, we've got the same flow. We're going to see some similarities and some differences, right? And then we're going to show how they all kind of come together. So in the OWASP world for mobile, start with the MASVS. We mentioned that earlier in terms of establishing standards, and proactive training is core. One of the things we do is we provide the 5 most common vulnerable coding mistakes that developers make, and encourage the free training be used by your developers, so that whether they're developing for iOS or Android or both, they can not make those mistakes, right? Boom, instant reduction in vulnerabilities, higher quality software, just with a little proactive training for a couple 15-minute courses. Policy and threat modeling up front as well, because it's about establishing what's a release policy. If I'm going to be moving fast through the pipeline, you want the software to give you the red light, green light on that policy, so that you can get through the releases quickly. And this is a way you can catch up in the scale world. Now, what's interesting about the mobile world is kind of state of the art has evolved into automated all-in-ones. So the leading mobile vendors are all-in-one SAST, DAST, IS, and API sec. So they run testing analysis on the binary itself. And when you do that, you get complete coverage of the app that actually runs in production. By running in production, you get first-party code, you get third-party code, you ignore the code that doesn't run, and you get the actual code paths that do run. So it's just like an attacker attacking your app. It uses an attacker orientation to automate and drive the app on a real device, just like an attacker or user would. And with the instrumentation wrapped around it, now you get deep, wide visibility into the behavior of the app when all these testing tools kind of run at once. So one 15-minute pass and boom, you've got it all in one place. Now, what we have found is the velocity in the pipeline correlates to the fast feedback loop. So being able to automatically generate tickets back to the developer, so that the developer gets the tickets in the workflow and no human has to triage what are the issues, what do I, is this a false positive or whatever. We've got like a 99.3% accuracy rate, which is great. You can automatically generate those tickets, and they include embedded remediation with just-in-time training. So in that world, then they're getting the code samples and everything else, but the embedded remediation is really about compressing the remediation time. So this whole loop in the middle, in a mobile world, you can use automation and integrations to run really fast. I run a fast test cycle, I automatically generate the tickets, they've got embedded remediations, you get fast mean time to repair. All of that is how you can kind of accelerate the pipeline velocity and work at the speed that developers want to run at. Now, Patrick brought up a really good point, is that some applications need a little more testing. Now, there's the big pen test, which is you pause your pipeline and some humans go tear down an app, and that can take weeks, right? But a guided test is an innovation we brought to market, which is a security analyst leverages the automation and steps in and does some extra work in the background. So it's kind of like a partial pen test that closes the gap on what the automation doesn't cover. So if I can automate 80 or 90% of a full scope, 80 to 90% of what's considered a quality pen test, and then I slap guided test, which is a human does a little bit more, I'm getting pretty close in a relatively fast cycle to make it work. Now, that doesn't mean don't do a pen test. Do the pen test when you need to, right? But that's really now for a smaller and smaller population. So a lot of our customers now are running with maybe one annual pen test and leveraging the fully automated and occasionally the guided tests where needed, depending on the risk profile. And that's how you get velocity through the pipeline and still getting security coverage through the pipeline as well. Now, mobile has some unique certifications. So for those of you who may be new to it, I was just at DroidCon talking about ADA MASA, which is an Android validation that is an independent security review. So depending on the industry you're in, you might have a PCI certification or what have you. What's interesting is that Apple and Google have been evolving their own privacy safety mandates. And one of the ones that Android has is the ADA MASA validation. So that's something to consider. You want to get that before you go into the App Store. By getting that validation, an independent third party is verifying that you really do meet this bar of security, and you get a badge in the Google Play Store that says you meet that level of security. So another thing that's a little different between mobile and web. One of the other things that's a little different than web is that with these changes with Apple and Google, now you need to submit attestation documentation that describes what you're doing for privacy and data safety. There are safety nutrition labels in the iOS world. There are data safety section in the Google Play Android world, but these are now requirements. And what's kind of interesting is we've seen some clients get caught up in their App Store submissions and getting denied because developers didn't know how to fill these out. So whether the security team does it or the development team does it, the developer is usually the one that owns the App Store submission process, but they sometimes need help with this, and we've got tooling that can help you through that. Last thing that Patrick said is what you built and tested actually in prod? We'll make sure you're monitoring the App Store for what you publish to the App Store to make sure it's running correctly and you don't have issues with that in prod or new 0 days didn't show up that you want to catch in production. So that's kind of what mobile looks like. Now, bring it all together, if I've got dozens or hundreds of both pipelines, Patrick, how does this all come together? How do I organize this to tackle the problem?
Well, and that is the challenge that a lot of organizations, particularly the larger ones who, like you say, are running, hundreds of pipelines, dozens, hundreds, some even thousands of application development projects at the same time. And this is where I come back to that, getting that centralized model for rolling out policies. So, it's key, as Brian pointed out, your your mobile applications aren't generally standing, by themselves. And many overall application rollouts, right? The web application, the mobile application are kind of two interfaces to a lot of the same back-end data, even the same back-end systems. So it's important for teams to be able to consolidate the view across these two pipelines as well. You have noticed that across these last two slides that we went over, there's a lot of tests being run. So each one of those is generating findings. So even just trying to sort through those and identify what were the highest priority issues to go and remediate when. How do these things correlate to each other? Are they the same issue being reported by multiple tools? That's where bringing this all together into a centralized place to apply your policies, manage these tests, align these findings, and help the teams cut through the noise, because that is one of the challenges the teams have as they automate AppSec is they run tools faster, which means they produce more findings, which means their triage work gets harder. And so this is where having a solution like application security posture management helps teams cut through that and manage the challenges they have as they automate AppSec.
So ASPM is a cool new emerging market. Let's tie this all together and step up, because what's really happening now is security is moving from the sort of on-prem manual bucket of tools into a service. So how does this look in the web world?
Well, it's and really being driven by some of the same underlying desires that teams have is to try and find a way out of the complexity and the chaos that has been created as just a sheer result of the increased complexity and volume of software they're developing and in terms of the testing. So one way that is taking shape is that buyers are and teams are really looking to solutions that bring multiple analysis techniques together underneath one umbrella, provide a simpler user experience for their teams, and a simpler operational model. And that's driving to more of a desire for application security as a service, pulling these solutions out of the cloud, using them integrated to their pipelines, as most of their development tools are also delivered from the cloud as well.
Yeah, and we see those parallels in mobile, right? So the as a service world, we moved from a manual pen testing tool into cloud automation. We had a couple of customers say, that pen testing tool you sold us, can you stick that thing in the cloud and eliminate the human and let it run? Right? I mean, that's basically, we've been putting our own pen testing team and tools out of business to move. Now today, just a few weeks ago, I was at a customer, and their description of the problem they were trying to solve was move to AppSec as a service, right? And that very much kind of fits this pattern. And so keys to this are automation, keys to this are integration, keys to this are training and empowering the development team to do more of the work. QA has changed dramatically now, with developers often responsible for writing functional tests and writing quality software. And the old QA, that I was in, for example, way back in the 90s, is kind of gone. Same thing's happening here across. And all of this is about kind of speeding through the pipe. In mobile, there's the unique thing around MASVS to take advantage of, and there's some of the unique things around guided testing that allows you to kind of bring a little bit of that hybrid pen testing into the high-speed automation pipeline that you might want to look into. So as we kind of bring it all together, as Patrick and I are looking at where is the world going, within a year or two, the world will be dominated by AppSec as a service, right? It's all about using standards, using policy, automation, integrations, and efficiency, right? How do you see this kind of coming together, Patrick, as you all from your large purview?
Yeah, and that emphasis is as a service, and really looking at the acronyms or the individual analysis techniques as fine-grained services that get mixed and matched dynamically as needed for the type of application, or even the stage in the application lifecycle. And bringing this together, though, teams really need to look holistically across both the web side and the mobile side of their application, because they may be two separate teams, they may have two separate pipelines, they may be using different tools, but at the end of the day, when the security team is asked, is our banking application secure, they have to answer that both for the web component and the mobile component. So it's really important for teams, to bring all this information together and get a holistic view of the risk posture of that overall service that they're delivering through web and mobile. And again, that's an area where this emerging technology space of application security posture management is evolving, and where we see more teams expressing interest of solving that problem. I've got a bunch of tools, I'm doing a bunch of testing. Now I need to look at how I pull this all together and have my AppSec flows run at the pace of my DevOps flows.
Absolutely. So as we think about kind of bring this all together for you all, thank you for coming on the journey today. I think what's really interesting about this is, as the market has evolved and the collection of individualized tools and techniques, now they're all coming back together into this service-based approach. As Patrick said, it's sort of on demand, use whatever combination of techniques or tools that are necessary. And in our world, we just talk about automated MAST. We don't focus on, is it SCA or SAST or DAST or whatever. It's about the outcome of how do I automate this stuff in my pipeline and make it run fast. So quick roundup, we announced a partnership just a few weeks ago, as we noted. We're really excited to be working with Synopsys. Why don't you round out Synopsys for us, and then I'll do the same for NowSecure.
You bet. So, again, Synopsys, we pride ourselves of having the most comprehensive portfolio of AppSec products and services to help teams really achieve whatever AppSec outcome they're steering towards. whether that requires new practices, new services, new tools, we can help them get there. We've built that on top of a portfolio of industry-leading AppSec technologies. They are available both in the cloud or on-prem, depending on how your team prefers to deploy AppSec. And we're helping teams simplify AppSec by unifying those tools and services underneath a single platform that allows them to really get a comprehensive view of their tests and security posture across their portfolio.
And so as Synopsys has the big portfolio, we bring the all-in-one from the mobile perspective, right? So SAST, DAST, IST, API, SEC, integrations, all of that, just all in one box. So you really get this single place to go for security automation and the pipelines. But we have that critical training, and it's interesting in the IDC survey how much that developer security knowledge was critical. We've freewared our training. So our development and security skills courseware is free. You can sign up for it today. I'll have a link to it in a little while and start your learning journey. And I'll encourage you, if you're a developer or a DevOps team, take a look at the 5 things developers need to know to write good code. It's really straightforward, guarantee it will improve your code quality. And then bringing in pen testing and guided testing for the high risk scenarios, right? Do it when you need to, but have the automation do the bulk of the work for you, really get you those efficiencies. So some resources. We always share resources. Patrick, tell the folks about what else they can learn here.
Well, a couple of reports that I would point the audience to that may help them, continue on this journey. One that we've published is the AppSec Strategy Guide, and it's a step-by-step breakdown of how to get to DevSecOps, and it hits on a lot of the points that we mentioned today, and goes into a bit more depth. So if you're looking to build up a plan for your own organization, that's a good place to start. And then you may be looking at this and saying, what, that's all great, but we also we don't yet have all the skills in-house. We really need to be getting some outside help to do testing. We published a guide to help you understand how you may evaluate and select outsourced security testing providers to augment your own capabilities. So that's another valuable resource for folks who are attending this webinar.
So thanks for those content shares. Got a few for you as well. I mentioned the free training. So NowSecure Academy is free and available to all of you. You can jump in today, get started on your learning journey, whether you're in the DevSec or DevOps kind of role. In addition to the DevSecOps Bunch monthly best practices sessions like this, we have Tech Talks every month, and we get great technical sessions. It's a 30-minute power. This past summer, our most popular one so far of the year has been how to build a simple mobile app with GitHub Copilot. So that gets your AI, GitHub integration, security automation built in, and all the rest. To encourage you to have a look at the Tech Talk series. It's growing in a lot of popularity. Now, every year we throw a big event called NowSecure Connect. It's the world's largest mobile security and privacy virtual conference. NowSecure Connect will be October 11th. You can sign up today. There's over 30 hours of online training, talks, and presentations, tons to learn from, and lots of fun, and it's free. So we encourage you to sign up. Synopsys will be joining us there, along with many others. There are sessions for Frida, there are sessions for DevSecOps, there are sessions for developers, separate sessions for security and privacy, and some other fun stuff as well. So please join us for that event. So it's Q&A time here. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of the questions coming in. I'll remind you, you can use the Q&A tab on your screen there. And I'm going to go into the questions. So first question, I'm going to steer your route, Patrick. So they said, my AST tools all have APIs for automation. What does ASPM do that they don't?
It's a good question. So yes, you absolutely can today, with most tools in the market provide a means to relatively easily incorporate them into CI pipelines or through SCM actions. But one of the challenges is how do you know which test to run, when? Running all your tools all the time. A lot of organizations will quickly find bogs things down, and that's where a lot of DevSecOps programs tend to fail. So one of the ways that ASPM can help is putting, applying those policies that you would define up front for when you want to run tests and which scenarios, and then applying that to automate the process of selecting which tests to run at each stage of the SDLC. So it's a way to avoid having the pipeline get congested by all of your AppSec tests.
All righty. So ASPM is to me, a really interesting development. I was in another industry in the data warehousing early on, and it's all about bringing the data together in one place to make the teams more efficient. There's actually two related questions here, so I'll just kind of glue them together. So the DAST is typically manual. How do you automate it? And then the next person said, there's no way to automate a pen test. What is this guided testing thing? So I'll kind of glue them together. So in the mobile world, we built a DAST automator. So it's actually, there is a device that has software automation in it. And so we take the mobile app, we install it on the device. The device has instrumentation built into the operating system. As the app is installed on the device, some monitoring code, some IAST code is injected into the app binary, and then it runs through an automation engine. So you get fully automated DAST. As a general rule in the market, NowSecure is known for innovating and creating a mobile dynamic test environment that is fully automated, right? Now, the challenge you have is completely automating an app and doing everything from a risk-based approach. And so guided testing takes DAST and adds the human to do the stuff the DAST can't. And so if I can automate, 80 or 90% of the MASVS test suite, but there's a few things like multi-factor authentication or pushing an order through a shopping cart or processing a credit card, you want a human to do some viewing, some action around that. And that's where guided testing comes in. It kind of goes the last mile for those things that fundamentally aren't automatable. And so what a lot of our customers have realized is that the 100% automation of testing a build every day through DAST, and once a month or once a release guided test to check for new features or something is a way that they can run really fast pipelines, meet their security and privacy requirements, and not have to wait for big lumpy pen tests, right? So it's a nice hybrid that we've kind of pulled back. I'm looking at the clock. There's one more question for you. You say it's important to have control of the open source, but other than tracking open source, what does control the supply chain mean?
So a lot of teams, so the progression they go down is they start out and they're not really tracking their open source, and so their first step is really just automating the process of having an always up-to-date catalog or bill of materials for the open source that they're running. Getting control out of that is going beyond reacting to new known vulnerabilities that are published, but really starting to look forward in how you're selecting the open source components, but also looking at other health characteristics, size of the community, activity of the community, sort of more provenance and reputation, so that you can anticipate which components might be more problematic going forward. And that's where we see software composition analysis evolving into more of the supply chain risk management discipline, where teams are moving beyond just tracking and managing known vulnerabilities to trying to get ahead of them and be more thoughtful in the component selection on the front end.
All righty. So I want to thank Patrick for joining us today, and for Synopsys for supporting today's event. As we said earlier, we're super excited about the partnership and where things can go. And Synopsys is certainly the one-stop shop for everything you need to really build a program of trust, especially around DevSecOps. We want to thank you all in the audience today for joining and for your questions. For those we didn't answer, we'll follow up with you afterwards, as we're running up on time here. Want to remind you that DevSecOps Bunch is here every month, as are the Tech Talks. So please sign up for the whole series and come back to the future ones. We've been doing this for about 3 years, so there's 2.5 years worth of history. So you can go back and play some of the other ones with other really great experts that have joined us over time. And with that, thank you again. We wish you a good day, and we'll speak to you soon.